Hey folks, Zach Osterman here. I'm Insider Indianapolis Star from a now empty Coliseo Roberto Clemente. Talking to you about Indiana 90. Let me get the score right. Indiana 93. I got the box over here. Mega Superbet 71. A fun game, I think, for really a lot. I mean, it was a fun crowd, first of all. Start there. A lot of IU fans, probably more than were there Wednesday night. You imagine some probably just came down for the weekend. And even, there was a pretty decent crowd of just sort of like local fans that I think came out to this game. This is the gym where the Puerto Rican national team plays its games. So there is a real, I know it's named after Roberto Clemente, but there is a real sort of, sort of basketball culture here particularly. And they got treated to a fascinating game. Indiana really struggled out of the gate. Indiana was down 31-16 after the end of the first quarter. Mega Superbet's lead actually crested at 44-21 in the second quarter. Darian DeVries was very frustrated, called multiple sort of stop the bleeding timeouts, and just Indiana I think really struggled in particular. It felt like with the way that this game was being officiated. These are international referees. It's an international court, which also means it's an international three-point line. It means some of your rules around things like gather and travel are different. It certainly meant tonight that there was a certain level of physicality that was being allowed in ball screen situations and in help defense and things like that Indiana I think really struggled to adjust to. There was also probably just an extent to which Indiana didn't necessarily expect Mega quite the level of physicality and I don't know if competitiveness is the right word, but this being an exhibition game, I think Mega probably caught Indiana a little bit flat-footed with just how physical it was early on, just how hard-working as a team it was. The game got even a little bit chippy, nothing dirty, I don't think, but just that little bit, it got to a place where everybody was really, really competing, and that turned into actually a really fun game once Indiana turned it around. The Hoosiers cut the lead to 13 at halftime, and in the second half they just turned it on and just completely, ran away with this game. I think at one point the run was something like 70-70. I think put it this way, Indiana's lead crested at 91-63 late in the fourth quarter. So if you do that math from 44-21, that is 70-19 or 70-19. Somebody somebody asked Lamar Wilkerson after the game. He led Indiana with 18 points, had a really, really good game, particularly in the second half, how it felt, kind of in the midst of that run. And he said it felt how you think it feels, essentially. And I think, listen, there's going to be a lot of exploring this game in different angles. We'll have, I'll have an insider tonight. We'll have more Sunday and even into Monday. These two teams will play again at the Coliseo Guillermo Angulo, where Indiana played Bayamon on Wednesday night. That'll be the last game Monday morning of Indiana's trip. They'll get on a plane and fly home after that. But we'll have a lot, obviously, spinning out of this game and even into that game. But I think that the biggest takeaway from tonight, more than anything else, is Indiana had to, for the first time this season, and I say this season because, in some respects, Indiana's been practicing in the way that it would in the preseason for 2 months now. So these are exhibition games, and Indiana will not go into its proper preseason for a while here. But there are ways in which this team is going to feel a little bit like this is an extension of the season, at least just in terms of their preparation and the physical toll and all that. Indiana had to figure it out together tonight. One of the things that was clearly sort of front of mind for Darian DeVries post-game, he said guys didn't go their own way. Guys didn't, when we got down, guys weren't trying to solve it themselves. They weren't trying to do, the individual thing. Everybody stuck together. And I think that's important. And this is probably, if you want to sum up kind of the thrust of what my insider will be later tonight, this is it. This is this team, and I wrote about this even before this tour, this team is populated with players that used to have to be that individual for the place where they were previously. That when a game was getting away from their team, they had to be a little bit selfish. They probably had to be a little bit more sort of assertive and say, no, I'm the alpha, I'm the leading scorer, I'm the best player on this team, I need to go fix it. And I think one of the questions you had, certainly one of the questions I had anyway, about Indiana coming into this week was how would Indiana manage blending all of those skill sets and all of those personalities? How would Indiana manage trying to make sure that it was getting the best out of all of those players without maybe any of those players going a little too individual, or without anybody kind of either A, getting a little bit too sort of ball dominant or whatever, or B, disappearing, because when it's a different kind of role, when you're sort of one of three or four instead of one of one or two. And I think there's still ways in which this will continue to evolve. I don't think we've seen Tucker DeVries best yet, for example. I think, tonight was, there were a couple stretches, including a 6-0 run in the second quarter, that helped kind of ignite the run that, of course, eventually became the big run. But first was the run that just sort of got the game back to a manageable deficit around halftime. Reed Bailey had kind of his own personal 6-0 run. And I thought in that stretch, you saw him turn on just kind of flip a switch with his aggressiveness, his ability to handle the ball for a player his size, his ability to attack downhill, in a way that most players who will guard the 5 won't be able to handle going outside in. There are different ways in which I think Indiana's still got to grow. And listen, the other part of this is, you can give Indiana all the credit in the world for the comeback and for winning the game the way that they did, and they deserve that. Indiana was still down 23 points in this game, in the second quarter. I mean, Indiana was still down 23 points in this game after basically about 15 minutes. So, I think that will probably be a teaching point for Darian DeVries as well, understandably. But the biggest key, I think, for Indiana tonight, the biggest takeaway, the biggest sort of victory beyond the literal final score, is that this team had to pick itself up collectively. It had to solve these problems collectively. It had guard trouble, so Alexa Ristic had to step in, and Indiana just found a way through that. Ristic played well. Indiana, older teammates helped him through what they needed to. Indiana needed to make some shots, so shot makers like Wilkerson, like Trent Sisley had a couple big ones. Tucker DeVries, shot makers made shots. Indiana needed to learn how to really harness momentum, and they did that. It was the kind of game that I think if you're Darian DeVries, I'm not sitting here, I'm not interested in making predictions about what's going to happen in February and March on August 9th. But if you're Darian DeVries, it's the kind of game where if you have a good season next year, there, I suspect, are going to be a few moments that you look back on and you say, that Saturday night in Puerto Rico, we are still reaching back for some of the lessons from that, and we're benefiting from them. If you want to talk about some individuals, and my computer's about to die here, I got to get back to the hotel. Sam Alexis, I thought, had a really, really good game. Wilkerson, certainly. 7 of 11 from the floor, made 4 of 7 threes. Sam Alexis, really good with his energy. Really good with his, he was kind of one of the solutions to the problem of just dealing with Mega's size and reach. He had 13 points and 8 rebounds. Again, Bailey had some really, really good moments. Tatum Connerway had foul issues. He finished with 4 fouls and 6 turnovers, but he also had 12 points and 5 assists. I thought Josiah Miles, he only made 1 shot, but I thought he looked just a lot more comfortable in the game. He had 8 rebounds. Again, another player that played a little bit bigger than his size when his team really, really needed him to. Trent Sisley, got some points late. He finished with 10 and I think 5 rebounds. But again, it was another one of those games where you just thought he doesn't look out of place on the floor. He's out there with older, more experienced, more talented players. Maybe not more talented, but you know what I'm trying to say. And he doesn't look out of place. He looks like he fits in, and his teammates respond to his energy. His teammates respond to the way he plays basketball. His teammates clearly recognize that he's a good player, and they get him involved, and they keep him involved because they know he's a good player, and that's meaningful for a freshman. And then, Tucker DeVries, I thought, he only has, I think, 10 points in the end, but he has 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. He had at least 2 blocks. They have him credited with 2 blocks. I feel like he might have had 1 more, but one way or the other, just a really good night all around. I think Alexa Ristic, I think, deserves a lot of credit. Connor Enright fouled out in the third quarter. Connerway had the foul trouble. Ristic had to step in and solve a lot of problems without a lot of time on task with this group, and he played well. So it was a very good night for Indiana. I think it was a night that Indiana will feel like it not only won the game, but it made some very real progress, some very tangible and important progress. So we'll leave it there for now. Again, more coming at indystar.com/sports. Please like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. We'll keep all of this coming tonight, tomorrow, all the way through to next week, even after the tour probably. So thank you so much for watching. For the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. We'll talk to you soon.